One of the arguments for eliminating the penny is, oh, we just don't have to deal with it anymore. It'll be more convenient not to have to deal with it. And it completely ignores what the cost is of having transactions done a different way. So the bills that I'm familiar with over the years that have been proposed propose a rounding scheme where if the price of the transaction, which might be for one item or 3 items or 20, if the total cost of the transaction ends in a 1 or a 2 or a 6 or a 7, it'll be rounded down to the nearest nickel. And if it ends in a 3 or a 4 or an 8 or a 9, it'll be rounded up.
So the first thing is that in, 2/3 of all transactions, there wouldn't be any rounding at all, because you'd be paying with a debit card, a credit card, a check, whatever, and then you wouldn't have to round.
So the pricing of items wouldn't change. Your candy bar would still be $1.49, and your cup of coffee, $1.99. It's only the total sum of your transaction, $3.48, plus tax, $3.77, that gets rounded. In this case, down to $3.75.
There's always suspicion when you look at things rounding up, rounding down, and we've certainly dealt with that with gas prices, and you generally get questions, why does the price end in 0.9? The pumps are calibrated to look up, look down, round up, round down. It's no different at the deli than getting a pound of ham at $5.99 a pound and getting 0.51 pounds. They round up, round down for the final price. They do the same thing with taxes when you get tax assessments. It's not something that's uncommon.
I got the price book for a convenience store chain in the Mid-Atlantic region on a confidential basis, and 90% of their prices ended in a 9. And that's attractive to them in making the transaction. But from the point of view of rounding, if people bought a single item and it ended in a 9, prices are going to be rounded up 90% of the time. So that's the extreme. So now we're in an empirical question. What's the typical price structure across different companies, industries, et cetera, and how many items do people buy? And I concluded, based on the analysis I did, that there would be net rounding up.
Yeah, so one of the big issues people have with getting rid of the penny is that if you got rid of it, the customer would be gouged. I wasn't quite sure I bought that argument when I first read it, just because, well, people don't usually only buy one item, and so when you add multiple items, who knows what the last digit's going to be. But there's also this thing called taxes, and so that's going to add something on in a lot of cases. And I just had this feeling that probably the last digit was going to be pretty random. And so I was kind of looking for some data on this, and I was talking to a guy at church and found out that he worked for this gas station and convenience store chain headquartered here in town. And I said, hey, wow, it'd be really cool if I could get some data on, what the actual cash register total is when people buy things at these convenience stores. And he said, yeah, we can get that. He sent me over, tens of thousands of observations. And so I was able to look across these states, and when I did it, my gut feeling was right, that the final digit was basically pretty random. I found actually ever so slight rounding in favor of the customer, but it was pretty darn close to 0.
I think his study is useful, but he would be the first one to admit his data is not exactly what you'd like to have. He had actual transactions data. I was able to take data for actual items and then just assume whether people bought 1 through 10 items and look at the differences in rounding. So to me, it's the classic apples and oranges problem. They're all mashed together, and I don't know what to conclude from it when he found that it didn't look like there'd be much net rounding.
I'm not sure I'd call it a classic case of apples and oranges, but Professors Lombra and Whaples are certainly using 2 very different sets of data. The 2 hashed it out in a series of columns in the Wall Street Journal. Lombra, armed with the formal study he conducted at the request of Americans for Common Sense, that same pro-penny lobby we mentioned earlier. Who has the stronger argument is still up for debate, but both agree that factoring in cash versus credit card transactions is an important part of the puzzle.